Thank you, Mike. When Mike first asked me if I would come to Gainesville, Hall County, and speak to the Tea Party group, I said, "Are you sure?" I said, I'll be glad to come over there. And I told my campaign manager, David Ferguson, and he's back there somewhere, I think. I said, "I have no idea how many people will be here. It could be 0 people here. They may boycott us, whatever." And then Mike called and said, "They're not serving dinner tonight because the chef quit." And I said, "Well, if that's not a good sign that the chef quit, they heard I was coming." But I'm glad the rest of y'all are here. I am David Pennington, the mayor of Dalton. I am married now for 36 years, and I'm an independent insurance agent, 3rd-generation independent insurance agent. And I've told people my favorite thing about politics, I didn't run for anything until 6 years ago, as the mayor of Dalton. I felt like Dalton had gotten off on the wrong track. And when you've been in Dalton your entire life, multi-generations, I felt like I needed to do something. But I said, what I like best about politics versus my business. In my business, I got to try to make 100% of my clients happy. In politics, I just need 50% plus 1. And I've always counted on my wife for 36 years as being that one. And sometimes I'm a little concerned about that. I was coming back from South Georgia a few weeks ago on a trip, and she told me I've been gone for 4 days, and she told me my dog missed me. She didn't say she missed me, she said my dog missed me. And I'm on my last fumes at this meeting here because we've been across Georgia again starting Monday morning with a big campaign rollout. So I'll try to do my best, and hopefully I won't let you down as far as my message tonight. My message tonight is really about restoring Georgia to our rightful place, where we were in the mid-'70s through about 2000, the economic power of the South, the marvel of America, watching this state grow rapidly during that 25 years. A lot of people forget we led the nation in per capita income growth in the 1980s and 1990s before we lost our way. Also, we're going to answer a question during this Republican primary. And that question is this, because I've got a 5-way test for Republicans. And that 5-way test is this. Do you believe in limited government, less spending, less taxes, less regulations, and open and transparent government, or do you not? And I can tell you, as mayor of Dalton, that's what we practiced every day for 6 years. We reduced the size and scope of city government. We're now 20% smaller personnel-wise than what we were 6 years ago. We've cut spending. We've cut property taxes 6 consecutive years now by a total of about 28%. We've reduced regulations, cut most business license fees in half. And how's that worked out for Dalton? Obviously, I think most of y'all realize we're the carpet capital of the world. We're totally tied to home building. And the carpet industry lost 40% of the residential sales during that downturn. And we still, in 2012, ranked 9th amongst American cities in fastest growing incomes. So I would say limited government works. Now let's compare that to the state. And once again, limited government, less spending, less taxes, less regulation, and open and transparent government. The state, for the last 3 years, is 0 for 5. They've increased the size and scope of state government, particularly at the expense of the local governments. They've increased state spending now by almost $2.5 billion. That's in less than 3 years. Nathan wanted to increase it by $4 billion because if you remember a year and a half ago, he heavily campaigned with the mayor of Atlanta for the Haiti Tea Splosh. Thank goodness 85% of Georgians decided that's not good for this state as slow as things are going right now. He's increased taxes multiple ways, and I'll just concentrate on one. The new way we tax automobile sales now in the state, the TABT tax. It was sold on the legislature last year as being a revenue neutral tax. Well, it's anything but revenue neutral. It's now bringing in anywhere from $30 to $35 million additional a month. And once again, it's going to take almost $400 million out of a struggling Georgia economy. And there's no better example of how much we're struggling in Georgia than this. In fiscal year 2013, which just ended June 30th, and understand the consumer is 70% of our economy. The gross retail sales and use tax collections in Georgia rose by only 1%. If you adjusted that with inflation and population growth, we were dead in the water. And more concerning, the last 4 months, it looks like we're backing up. Georgia's not recovering. They've increased regulations. The EPD, which is our version of the EPA. This year they passed a bill to allow the EPD to charge businesses that are expanding or businesses that want to build in Georgia from $1,000 to $40,000 to move their permit to the top of the stack. And when I read that, I said, are they talking about Soviet Georgia? Or are they talking about Georgia in the United States? And now we have to bribe a bureaucrat to do his job. in order to move our permits to the top of the stack. Last, open and transparent government. And I'll go back to another tax, the hospital bed tax. It was passed 3 years ago as a temporary measure to get us out of the recession, to have our Medicaid funding. Came up for renewal this year. I didn't like the way it was passed 3 years ago. If they had to do that, I thought there was a better way to do that. But this time, instead of renewing what I thought was a bad way to tax Georgians to begin with, because believe me, hospitals aren't paying that tax. They're passing on mostly to small businesses, their insurance companies, and people paying cash at the hospital. This time, instead of the legislature voting on that tax, as we duly elect them and send them to do, they now remove that tax levying authority to an unelected board, the Department of Community Health. And now they can levy that tax, which they did immediately at 1.45% of hospital revenues. That brings in about $240 million a year. But they also have the authority to take that 6%, which would be $1 billion a year tax. And you'll never know it, because your legislature never has to vote on it again. And they used as precedent for that the nursing home bed tax that was passed in 2003. They did the same thing with that, moved it to the Department of Community Health. In that first year, 2003, they levied that tax at $7.35 per bed per day on nursing homes. And guess what today? It's now at its maximum, $17.10 per bed per day, $6,000 per nursing home bed every year. The last 3 years, under Nathan Deal's leadership, it's risen by 28%. It's gone from $13.39 to $17.10 per bed per day, and we never knew it, because your legislature doesn't have to vote on it. That type of non-transparency in a democratic republic will not work long term. So how's this worked out for Georgia? Well, we're supposedly not taking the Medicaid expansion. Well, since the recovery, we've expanded Medicaid in this state by 15%. Sounds like to me we're expanding. We've expanded about $300 million of additional Medicaid spending in the last 2 years alone. Sounds like we're expanding Medicaid to me, because of our poor economic policies is why that's happening. We've gone from 15th to 6th in the last few years in food stamp recipients. Had over 40,000 new food stamp recipients in the last year alone. And the first time in Georgia history, we now rank in the top 10 of childhood poverty. We've gone from 11th to 6th in the last 3 years. So it doesn't sound like to me these type policies are working very well. If we go back to what we're supposed to be doing, at least what I think made America great, was a limited government philosophy. Georgia is no longer competitive from a tax and regulatory standpoint. We were very uncompetitive until 2 months ago, and now North Carolina has made us officially the most uncompetitive state in the South when they passed their tax reform. In this year alone, 18 states, 13 of them Republican governors, have cut their taxes. Georgia's not one of those 18 states, but the state just to the north of me in Tennessee, who has no state income tax, they reduced other taxes, their sales taxes, this year. Florida, just to the south of us, who has no state income tax, they cut their taxes too. So not only are we not becoming competitive, every year, every month, we're becoming less competitive. And that's why our state has gone from the marvel of America and to trailing America in almost every economic indicator. First thing we need to do to restore Georgia back to its economic greatness is cut the income tax. And we need to cut it from 6% to 4% immediately, hopefully on its way to eliminating the income tax. Now, that's going to cost Georgian revenues a little over $2.3 billion a year. In the last 3 years, we've increased spending by more than that amount. We could have done that 3 years ago without cutting spending. But we didn't want to control spending, so we didn't do that. So we're deeper in the hole now than we were then. Secondly, most Georgians, unfortunately, are only well-educated enough to get a good job in a manufacturing plant. Georgia's lost more manufacturing jobs per capita than any other state in the South. I know a little bit about manufacturing, being in the last true manufacturing center left in Georgia, because of the carpet industry. We need to allow 100% expensing of all capital purchase for all businesses, not just manufacturers, in the first year. Most of the states surrounding us allows for accelerated depreciation. We don't allow for that. If we'll allow 100%, that will give us a leg up on all the other states surrounding us. And when you combine that with the best ports in America, one of the best airports in the world, great utilities, competitive utilities, the best interstate system in the South, the best railroad network in the South, good universities. Georgia can become a manufacturing powerhouse all throughout the state. One thing that surprised me campaigning across the state is the great assets that South Georgia has. You know, they got a lot better land than we got. They've got east-west four-lane highways, and we know that if you go from Gainesville to Dalton or Dalton to Gainesville, it's hard to get there from here. They've got those highways, and they also are closer to the ports than we have. If we'll do those two things, you'll see Georgia recovering quicker than any other state in America. Second part is obviously we've got to become better educated. And I truly believe you can trace the decline of public education in this country, first with the centralization of the power into state capitals, and now into Washington, D.C. In 1900, only 10% of 18-year-olds had a high school diploma. By 1970, 80% of 18-year-olds had a high school diploma. And understand this, during that 70-year period, it was almost total local control. In the 1970s, when we started centralizing the power in state government, first with QBE, then in the federal government, it was race to the top, no child left behind, Common Core. We're great at slogans. We're very poor at execution because centralized power and authority doesn't work. That's why the Soviet Union fell apart. We need to close the achievement gap and lead America by decentralizing the authority and control back to local school boards, local school teachers to be creative, and have the community to take their public schools over again. Now, will there be failures? No doubt about it. In the free marketplace, there are failures, but I'll assure you there'll be a lot more successes than failures, and it beats having one big failure that we have right now. Because as we centralize power and control, whether in state houses in Washington, D.C., you don't lift the ones at the bottom up. You take the ones at the top and you take them down. And we need to understand that. It's the way in business, education, politics, whatever. That's what made this country great. Also, from an education standpoint, we understand now in today's world to be competitive, we need more people going to college, more people going to technical school. Our governor agrees with that. Unfortunately, since he's been governor for the first time in 40 years, the university system has lost students for 2 years in a row. And the technical schools have lost over 11,000 in the last 2 years alone. We're heading in the wrong direction. And one thing we need to understand about the Georgia colleges, with hope or no hope, is the fact that we're making it unaffordable for most kids in Georgia to be able to go to college or technical school. Georgia has grown their net tuition, this is after all hope grants, all scholarships, in the last 6 years, about 77%. The next closest state to us has only grown by 42%. We're pricing that very important college education or technical education out of most Georgians' hands because we've gotten so poor. We can do better than that. The last thing is this. The biggest deficit in this country to me is not the trade deficit. It's not the budget deficit. It's the trust deficit that we have in our federal, state, and local officials. You can't operate a great democratic republic if you don't trust the people that are governing. In Georgia, we decided a few years ago, the legislature did, that it was important for city councils, county commissions, and school boards to be under open meetings laws. And I support that 100%. But they exempted themselves from it. And you look at some of the worst legislation that's passed over the last few years. It was sprung on your legislator the last day, and they were made to vote on it. If they had to come up with that legislation in open meetings, you wouldn't have seen that. It's amazing how much better government gets when you let the sun shine in. Georgia is a great state. We didn't lead the nation in the 1980s and 1990s in per capita income growth because we were lucky. I've named you some of the resources that we have. We're the 8th largest state in America. If we'll get back to those 5 principles of mine, the 5-way test for Republicans: limited government, less spending, less taxes, less regulations, and open and transparent government, I'll assure you we'll be the marvel of America again, and we'll live up to our name of the Empire State of the South. But understand this to me, this is not just a Georgia issue. This is a national issue. Because when we listen to the congressman's representative here talking about Obamacare, if you think we're going to reform Washington, D.C. through the United States Congress, we've tried that. We're going to reform Washington, D.C. through the states assuming their authority again through the Constitution. And also getting ourselves healthy again economically. What's happening now, Washington, D.C. prints the money, buys off the states, whether it's race to the top money, Common Core, Medicaid money, and then we become subservient to them. And I'll assure you, our founding fathers never dreamed of the situation that we have now in this country. I was not a politician. I'm still not a full-time politician. I'm a part-time mayor, and in Dalton, as a part-time mayor, you know, to show people my commitment to public service, we're paid a salary, but I donate that salary to Dalton State College for scholarships. It's now over 30 kids. If I haven't accomplished anything else as mayor of Dalton, we've helped educate over 30 kids. I think a dozen or more have graduated because of that. You know, I'm doing this not because I want to be a full-time politician. Now, I'm a full-time business person. I've made my income over the years in spite of government for the most part, while full-time politicians make their money off of government. But Georgia needs to lead the recovery in this country by recovering ourselves in Georgia. And we'll do that. Once again, I know I'm being repetitive, but this means a lot to me. It's my 5-way test. And I'm going to find out on May 20th, is the Georgia Republican Party truly a party of limited government, less spending, less taxes, less regulation, and open and transparent government? Thank you all. Questions, Mike? You want to? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes,
The board of regions
yes, sir.
has taken the position in the last couple of years of merging all of these colleges.
Mm-hmm.
And initially Huckabee came out, and my first impression was, well, you know, they're gonna, like bank mergers, save a lot of money, but I can't have a lot of people. My question to you is, then Huckabee came out pretty much later and said, no, I don't think there's gonna be any savings. What is going on here? Why are we merging all these colleges?
Well, once again, they came up with a plan that nobody understood because they didn't tell us what the plan was. And anybody that's in business, particularly in service business like I'm in, by merging disparate organizations, you know, you rarely, it's not like a manufacturing plant. You know, we're not making widgets there. I'm not sure what the plan was. And now what they've done, unfortunately, is you're taking schools, you've got two here, Gainesville College and North Georgia College. They really had two different missions and also great histories. You've got Augusta Medical School and what's the one down there, Augusta State. Two totally different missions. Southern Tech and Kennesaw's the craziest one I've seen yet. So I'm not real sure what the mission is, but I'll say this, and I'll say this about the university system, and I'll say this about the state of Georgia, where we cut the biggest percentage of spending in Dalton to allow us to reduce taxes. Was we cut administration by over 50%. We didn't cut policemen. We didn't cut firemen. They're the ones who live in those services every day. We cut the administration. The state is even more top-heavy than the city of Dalton is, and the university system is even more top-heavy than they are. That's where it needs to be cut. You don't need any merge colleges to do that. You need to have the courage to do that. And it's the Atlanta Journal, an article about me today, which is I can't disagree with it. They called me stubborn. And also, what they also stubborn and blunt. And I've been called that more than once.
Sounds good.
Keep it up. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I've read and heard that Emory and Georgia Tech will probably not be able to accept students who graduate from our high schools after having received a Common Core education because they won't have the math skills necessary to be successful in those colleges.
That's why, once again, I trust Gainesville and Hall County. I think some of y'all from White County and Banks County, you know what's best for your communities. Now, that said, you know, once I'm elected governor, I can tell you, the more we go around this state, we're going to win this. I hate to enforce some of y'all who don't want me to win it, but we're going to win this. And, you know, we're going to give y'all the authority to do what we used to do in Dalton, Georgia, and y'all did in Gainesville, Georgia, 40 and 50 years ago. You ran your own school systems, and we were far better off. I already gave you the data. You know, we went from 10% to 8% high school graduates, you know, in a 70-year period in this country. We turned it over to the centralized powers. We dropped back to 74% when we need more high school diplomas now than we've ever had. So I trust the local people. And we're going to turn this state around, not through Atlanta, Georgia, and certainly not through me. We're going to turn it around from Gainesville, Hall County, Dalton, and Whitfield County, Valdosta and Lowndes County, Cobb and Marietta. We're going to do it one community at a time, and then we're going to show the country how this is done, and the states then will turn around Washington, D.C. We'll never have a better time than this. 34 governors, I think, are Republican governors. If they're truly past my 5-way test, everybody needs to be doing what we're talking about. Because as a small business person, and understand this about small businesses, most of us only employ 10, 12, 30, 60, 90 people. We create 65% of the net new jobs in America. Not GE, General Motors. They buy people and lay them off. If we don't get small businesses going again in this country, you've seen the best economy you're ever going to see. And right now, state governments, local governments, and federal governments, they're smothering us. We can't get off the bottom. Yes, sir.
You referenced the need for the state to stand up against the federal government in terms of its constitutional rights. And I'd like to know where you stand on this spectrum there, from political inflammatory rhetoric to nullification to interposition to secession. At what point would you take any or all of those steps?
My family's been in Georgia since 1751. And the succession part of it didn't work out real well for us. So I don't think we need to go quite there. Understand this, we can talk about all we want to in theory. When we're heavily dependent on the federal government's money coming to us, it's difficult to act very independently. As we all told our children when they're growing up, when they wanted to get real independent, they're welcome to get independent. They're going to buy their own food and pay for their house or whatever. We first got to heal Georgia's economy. But also during that time, we got to understand the things that we need to understand and know. The education situation is a good example. One reason we're sort of stuck, or they think we're stuck in this Common Core situation that we're in, for whatever reason, state and local taxpayers, and we're both in this room, fund K-12 education in this state to the tune of over $13 billion a year. We sold our state's sovereignty out to the federal government for $100 million a year race to the top funds. What business person would make that decision?
You don't want to take it back.
Excuse me?
What does it take for you to want to
We don't take it. We send it back. And I can tell you this, if we would take most of these mandates that are ridiculous mandates off teachers, off administrators, we can save far more than that $100 million and provide a far better education than what we are right now. It's the bureaucrats in total charge at the moment, from the federal, state, and local level. Think about it as a business person. Think about it as a business person when you want to expand your business in Hall County, what you have to go through with your own county government or city government, permits and all this other. They give you all the reasons for it. There is no good reason for it. It's amazing. I'm a baby boomer. I went all through school, and we were the biggest group of kids to ever come through the K-12 education system. Well, how in the world did we do that without a SPLOST? And I can tell you the happiest person in my life is going to be the chairman of our county commission when I resign as mayor the first week in May to qualify to run for governor, because I haven't had it let him have a SPLOST in over 6 years. We've gone the longest of any county in Georgia without a SPLOST. And come over to Whitfield County and Dalton and tell me if you think we're falling to rack and ruin because of it. We're not. Yes, sir.
He had mentioned seceding, but just in terms of withdrawal from the United States, is there anything that the United States could do that would be so tyrannical in your mind that you would withdraw? Is there any line that you would put in the sand?
Well, I mean, to be frank, I think we're already doing that when you're talking about tyrannical. When you look at, we've gone from 1st to 11th, this century, I'm talking about the 21st century, we've gone from 1st to 11th in the freedom rankings in the world. The United States of America, the ones everybody else used to look at, is the example of freedom. We've gone from 2nd to 16th in economic freedoms. And guess what? Our economy went with it. So we're already in that. This is, as I said before, I mean, I think y'all can tell, those of y'all didn't know me before, I'm not a politically correct person. I'm blunt and to the point. I'm not doing this because I had a great dream to be a political an operative. I'm doing this for one reason. Number one, I'm one of the most independent people you'll ever meet. And by golly, I don't want to see this country go down the drain. And that's where we're going every day. So we're in it now. That's why I'm running for governor. That's why I ran for mayor. That's why I'm running for governor. And hopefully we can be an example for a lot of other people, particularly business people. More business people need to, we're selfish. We want to make our money, leave us alone, let the politicians handle it. Well, guess what? Before we knew it, now we're losing our businesses because of it. Yes, sir.
As long as you're funding Washington DC and allowing money to go directly to Washington DC with no restrictions, with no respect to the Constitution, how do you expect to bring Georgia back when the only way you're going to get the money back from them is with all the conditions that they provide? Why is it that you can't collect the money for the state of Georgia and send it to Washington based on constitutional rule?
Well, because they changed the Constitution in when the Income Tax Act came into place.
But it ain't working.
I don't disagree with it. I don't disagree. And part of it too is we need to quit asking for stuff. We need to quit asking for
When you
stuff.
give it, you have to ask for it back.
I don't disagree with you, but we sold ourselves. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of this overnight. We got to start. Right now, we're still digging. We haven't quit digging yet. Yes, sir.
Got a question. You have reference to the car tax, the way they changed it, and basically you're paying it up front, whereas in years past, you paid a little bit every year. But one of the significant things they did, and this was one of our car dealers in town by the name of Butch Miller, he changed the shade tree right. In other words, I could sell you a car, and that was it. And then you go down and get your tag. Well, what they've done now is, when I sell you the car, and I gave you a real deal, $5,000, then when you go down, the county looks at it and says, oh no, that's a $10,000 car. You're gonna pay 6.5% on 10,000. Would you consider taking that car tax back?
Yeah, I was hoping, to tell you the truth, when they realized all the errors they had in that tax.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, they did not, as far as I know, they didn't meet with a single tax commissioner in Georgia anywhere. They didn't know what they were doing when they did.
It was a total surprise.
That thing did three things. They're hoping to buy everybody else saying the birthday tax is going away, which, it is going away. But what's going to happen? That birthday tax is going away. If your local governments don't get their spending under control, they're going to raise your property taxes to make up for it. I'll assure you that. The second thing is, if that wasn't a revenue grab, as far as taxing driveway sales or casual sales, if that wasn't a revenue grab, then why didn't they, keep in mind, that was 60% of sales in Georgia, I think. Why didn't they take the revenue from that and cut our income taxes with that? They didn't do that. That was a revenue grab. Secondly, they changed the way that we tax lease deals, which were a third of Georgia deals of 2 years ago. Before, you paid the 6.5%, which is going to 6 3/4 automatically next year, 7% the year after, and an unelected revenue commissioner can take it to 9% if enough revenue is not coming in. And I'll assure you, it's going to 9%. But anyway, before they just paid that 6.5% on each monthly lease payment. Now they have to pay the 6.5% on the upfront value of the car, although they're only giving 3 years. And then worse than that is that anybody moving to Georgia, when they move to Georgia, although they pay the tax wherever they came from, they got to pay the 6.5%, 6 3/4%. It's shocking a lot of people. And what we're finding out in Dalton, they're just not coming to Georgia. They're living in Tennessee because their taxing fees on cars are half ours anyway. And a lot of these people would like to come to Georgia and start businesses in Georgia. That was a terrible idea, whoever came up with that. Yes, that bill is terrible. It's number one, what's going to happen is when we're in another recession, and it's coming, I don't know when it's coming, and new car sales tank, the state's going to be in trouble, local government's going to be in trouble. That's a terrible way to structure a tax.
How many fleets are going to come to this town? You talk about the individual, but how many fleets will come to this
The
town?
ones that can figure out, but what we're doing too now, once again, but let me tell you what we're doing is big government now. Now they're going around looking for businesses that have businesses in Florida or in Tennessee, and they're checking the tags and saying, should that car be tagged into Georgia? It's a revenue grab is all that was. Yes, sir.
You mentioned cutting expenses, administrative costs especially, and less taxation. But what would be your spending priorities? What do you see that we need to spend? Whatever money comes in, that we need to spend it on?
We need to go what I think is the state's functions anyway, which number one is public safety. State patrol, the prison system, number one. We now have one of the worst run prison systems in America. We've got a prison just 30 miles west of Dalton called Hay State Prison. They can't even keep the locks on the cell block doors. and it's a maximum security prison. And that problem's all across Georgia. We have one of the most dangerous prison systems in Georgia. Our road system, we used to be the pride of the country with our DOT. But over the last 3 governors, they keep starting more authorities, more road authorities. We just saw one in the paper last week, the Atlanta paper, the State Road and Toll Authority, whatever it is. They got their own bureaucracy, millions of dollars of employees. We didn't have that 12 years ago. Roy Barnes started that. I was hoping that once this last director left to go into private enterprise, that we would do away with that authority, put it back under the DOT, and get rid of all those employees. They didn't. They hired another 6-figure employee to take his place. They got a deputy commissioner. How many toll roads do we have in Georgia to have all these employees? And besides that, the toll roads they're talking about, they're putting toll lanes on highways we already pay taxes for. Yes, sir.
In order to reduce the size and the consumption of the government, you're going to have to dismantle part of it.
Yes.
In general terms, can you discuss how you would attack that problem?
First of all, the thing about states, governments, and we went through this in business years ago. Because of the internet, computers, things like that, we eliminated middle management. Middle management really doesn't exist anymore in the business world. Because now the orders can come on top and get down to the people down at the bottom, and they have the authority to do what they need to do. States, for the most part, have become middle management. They have billions of dollars flowing through the federal government to them to go to local governments who are really providing all the services already. And, a lot of that has to be dismantled. It should have been dismantled a long time ago. But we need to get the state out of things they have no business being involved in to begin with. This last legislative session, understand this now, it was passed. I think we have a constitutional majority in the Senate of limited government conservatives. And I know they are because every time they campaign, they tell you they're limited government conservatives. We've got close to a House majority a constitutional majority of limited government conservatives. And we got a governor who says he's a limited government conservative. Well, they passed a bill this year for taxpayer-funded venture capital fund that they're going to put $100 million of our tax money in it. Can you think Solyndra? Closer to home, Range Fuels. That's where the money has to come from. These things we have no business being involved in to begin with. How about a new Falcon Stadium? We got a Braves stadium that's going to be built in Cobb County. Cobb County taxpayers want to pay for that. God bless them. Who's going to fix the roads around there? That is probably the second worst interchange in Georgia. I'll assure you, the DOT is going to have to spend many millions of dollars on road improvements there, and they're still going to have a traffic nightmare. Georgia has more truck traffic on I-75 than any other place in America. And understand that, that's important to us because we got very valuable ports down there. Well, if we can't start clearing the traffic up, and we know that because some of that stuff at the ports has got to get to Dalton, Georgia, coming through Atlanta. Other ports like Charleston are going to take business away from them because when we get something from Charleston into Dalton, we don't have to go through Atlanta. But those are the things that we need to do. And there's plenty more just like them out there. We spend 47% of our budget on K-12 education. If we start dismantling a lot of those mandates and ridiculous things they put in there, we can save local school systems a lot of money. We can save the state a lot of money.
You're going to be able to overcome the state civil service system barriers to reduction in forces, that sort of thing. That's a big jump. And I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just wondering how. As
the Atlanta Journal termed me today, being stubborn and blunt. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What, as a professional insurance man, what does the insurance industry, how does the insurance industry view Obamacare?
It's, well, unfortunately, what's happening, and Republicans allowed this to happen in 2000, 2006. You back out basically 5 giant health insurance companies that were allowed to buy everybody up. There is no competition amongst the health insurance companies anymore. When we get one of our clients and they're looking for a workers' comp policy, we got 50 different places we can go. In Dalton, Georgia, to get a health insurance policy, we both basically have 2 places we could go. If you notice whose stocks jumped the most as Obamacare has been rolling out, health insurance companies. They don't care what the premium is as long as it's enough for them to fund their whatever the claims are, and the more money they got flowing in there, the more money they're going to make. So if you're looking for the health insurance companies to be your savior in this, you're looking at the wrong place. They're not going to be that. They help support that bill. Yes, sir.
How do you knock out common core?
It's well, first of all, the way you knock it out is give the $100 million back, if that's what we have to do. When I went to school, and I think I'm fairly well educated, the person that made up my test was my teacher. She knew what we needed to learn, and we seem to do very well. The baby boomers invented the internet. All these huge inventions. Now, unfortunately, my generation is also the most selfish generation that's come through this country, but we're also the best educated generation. Our kids are not as well educated as we are, and we were educated under a system with almost total local control. So the thing about it is it just doesn't even work. That's the states are rolling out and finding that out. Let me say something about teachers too, before, because teachers are beat up. And they're the best educated workforce in the world. They all have 4-year degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees. And in my business, I wish our employees were that well educated, because we learned in business a long time ago, we got to give that frontline employee the authority to make the decisions, or else we're going to fail. And we've done that. The education system is the most top-down driven in America. They're not given any leeway. And on top of that, when people say there are bad teachers out there, yeah, there are bad teachers out there. There's bad governors, there's bad mayors, there's bad insurance agents, there's bad a lot of things. But they're probably the most dedicated workforce I've ever seen. And I've been in a lot of schools. And unfortunately, over the last few years, when you saw these horrible incidents that happened at New Hope or wherever, how many other people do you know that would lay down their lives for other people's children? And they've done that. What they need to be is freed up the same way small businesses are, by getting government and regulations off their back. Yes, sir.
What is your position on immigration?
Well, first of all, and usually I can say this easily, because I usually say no city has been affected by illegal immigration more than Dalton, Georgia. I know I'm over here in Gainesville, Georgia, so I think it may be a pretty close race there. I'm not for, obviously, I think there needs to be immigration reform, but I'm not for any immigration reform until we reform our social welfare system, because we can't afford anybody else coming on the boat. And right now, I'm not hearing that in Congress. They're either saying no, or, from one side just no, the other side we got to reform it, but nobody's bringing up, hey, yeah, we got to reform our social welfare system. Because I can tell you right now in Georgia, and in Dalton, Georgia, we don't have an unemployment problem for the most part anymore in Dalton, Whitfield County. We have an unemployable problem, because they figured out, instead of taking a $13, $14 an hour job, they can make more money sitting at home with all the benefits they can get. We've got to reform that system, because we can't have all these people sitting home. Imagine this. You're now in a state that you've got a generation of children that are being raised that have never seen a parent or parents go to work. Now, what do you think they're going to grow up to be? One more question. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Where do you stand on the Second Amendment, and has the city of Dalton accepted any of those military vehicles coming back from the war, those heavily armored tactical SWAT paraphernalia that's being offered to cities around the country?
My police chief doesn't ask for things like that, because he knows he's not going to get them. But from the Second Amendment standpoint, same way I stand on every amendment, it's the Constitution. And understand this. Those were very, very intelligent men 250 years ago, much more intelligent than I am. When they studied books in the language that it was written in. I have a difficult time studying in English. And they understood that we had to have a firm foundation for this experiment to work. And this has been the greatest experiment in the history of governing people on earth. And with that, they understood this. We had to build on some firm foundation of what our value system is, which is the Judeo-Christian values. And a lot of those men weren't Christians, but they understood this. If we didn't have that firm foundation, as we were embarking upon this great experiment, the further we get away from that, we're going to devolve into chaos. And we're beginning to see that now. And that's what we need to get back to, the same thing. So I'm a strict constitutionalist. And when it comes to the Second Amendment, if you're talking about really guns, first of all, it's not just a gun issue to me. First of all, I want to know, why do you want to take the guns? What's your problem with the guns? It's a freedom issue. And we've already gone from 1st to 11th. Pretty soon, we're going to have to change the last stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner about the land of the free. And I'm not overly exaggerating that. Think about your daily life now. I can't even buy the health plan I want to buy anymore. The President of the United States now dictates what kind of health insurance I have to have. To wrap this up, as you can tell, I'm a little bit passionate about my ideas in this state. And I told people I'm not campaigning. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to change Georgia, who's going to help change the country. You know, those of y'all who would like to help us join this mission, we've got a sign-up sheet back there. You can stay attuned to what's going on in the campaign. If you like to help or whatever, you know, if you'll sign this sheet, we appreciate it. I enjoyed being over here. Hopefully, I'll be back here for a debate, because I think your Republican representative here said he'd like to set one up, and we would enjoy that greatly. And the only thing I'll debate, if that's what Nathan wants, is the economy. He says he wants to run on his economic record. I want him to run on his economic record. Thank y'all.